Am I racist? This is an example of something that shouldn't have to be done but should be done in the interest of personal safety. Another example could be, women should not walk alone at night. Should women be able to safely walk alone at night? Of course. If they are assaulted by a man, is it her fault? Of course not. However, given that there is a chance of this happening, it would be in a woman's best interest to not walk alone at night. There's nothing racist about what you said. Black lady here. Your wife's point was probably that individualistic action will not get the job done. We need systemic action. While she may be right or wrong, more likely somewhere in between, your saying otherwise in and of itself doesn't make you racist. The funniest thing about these convos is that white people virtue signal so hard that they ironically ignore the black voice in the room. Black dude says it's good. White woman gets her panties twisted. Way too many internet fights on race where white people are up in arms and POC are fine. If we cared half as much as we say, we'd start taking our cues from the ones with the first-hand experience. Black woman here. The entire conversation about race has gone so out of hand. I don't even know what's considered racism anymore. Your wife sounds annoying. I have traveled extensively. Asian and African countries. Currently living in Australia, migrated from Kenya. And anytime there is a shift in the dominant culture, naturally your behavior adjusts accordingly. As a minority, naturally my behavior will change to adjust to Australian values and culture. There is nothing inherent racist about that. It's called being respectful. I think your friend, black male, is probably in the best position to judge if you, white male, are a racist rather than a bunch of porkers on the internet who haven't seen the sun since April. I think the point you made is towing the line on not being about race at all, but culture. If you're living in a location where the culture likes one thing and you do something else, expect to be treated differently. The issue is the degree to which some people take it. It is simply not okay to harass or outright attack someone simply because they do not fit into the cultural profile of where they live. But it slips just slightly into racism, as black people and other minorities are typically thought of as more deserving of a harsher punishment for breaking cultural norms. I think the entire discussion is so cluttered it's impossible to get a point across without someone finding it offensive. Speaking as a black male from the Caribbean living in Canada now, I understand your point of changing who I am for society to accept me. However, that same mentality is why there are a lot of black people from Caribbean who are hesitant to visit, move to places like the US and some parts of Canada, because the conversation should be how do we change that reality, not just accept it. Depends, to be honest. Change how exactly? As a black man myself who has no black friends, all of mine are Hispanic, I will say having a black friend doesn't make you automatically not a racist even if he agrees with your views, as there is a lot of self-hatred in our community. How you answer this question will make it better to judge. Blank woman here. The NPD just released an 89-page paper discussing all the instances of brutality and racism within their police department. Most of these police officers are not fired, and some of the instances were reports on Chauvin, the man who murdered George Floyd. It's easy to say change your behavior, but when the police automatically see black people as inherently more threatening, there's not much behavior you can change. The system needs to change, not random black people. Latino here. No, you're not racist. Changing your behavior according to who's around you is just common sense. Basic manners. Really. You're not racist for noticing that code switching is a real thing. That's the behavior you've identified here. All minorities do it in one way or another, generally speaking. Person of color here. No, I don't think you are racist for that sentiment. However, I gotta point out everyone is biased towards particular races, and that is very normal thing to develop in a hyper-racialized world. What isn't normal is not trying to figure out what your biases are and letting them run your life. If you make an effort to check your biases and use your white privilege to call out racism when you see it, then you are golden. If you are concerned that you are racist, that's a good sign that you care enough about your biases to make a correction. The point you made. That's how my parents raised me. Sad? Yes. But it's a reality that people will assume things, so it's better to avoid certain behaviors to not be targeted. My white boyfriend never understood why I avoided trying clothing when shopping. Why I avoid touching things when we go to stores and always ask why I always avoid going in with a big backpack or show it to security even before I enter some supermarkets. Extreme? Maybe. But that's how my parents raised me. They made me aware quite early that some things are less acceptable from people who look like me. You're not a racist. You're a pragmatist. Your advice is similar to telling a 20-year-old woman not to get blackout drunk at a frat party full of strangers unless she wants to wake up with a pussy full of goo. It's unfortunate, but this is the world we live in. And it makes sense to alter our behavior to avoid unpleasant outcomes. Your wife is an idealist. And that's a very dangerous way to conduct your life. Emo. You need to be aware and cognizant of the world around you and how it works. We were talking about systemic racism, and I said that unfortunately black people and those of minorities need to alter their behavior at times to, hopefully, not get targeted or attacked. I'm saying this as a black woman. I understand what you're saying. But I also think this can come off as victim blaming. For instance, if we talked about police misconduct, there have been cases where a black person was literally standing still and the police, without provocation, shot them. It's common rhetoric of, well, if they had just not resisted, run away, been combative, then the police wouldn't have had to take action, and that's just not true sometimes. Or if we talked about work, if your boss truly believes black people are unkempt and combative no matter what, then how can a black person reasonably change their behavior to appease them and not get fired? You can never offer your opinions, and your natural state of being is automatically looked down upon. If I had to compare it to something, it's like if you were talking about sexual assault and you said, unfortunately women need to alter their behavior at times to, hopefully, not get targeted or attacked. They shouldn't have to, but it's reality. It sounds like great advice in a vacuum. But to those women who were assaulted doing nothing, it sounds more like, there was something you should have done and you wouldn't have gotten assaulted. I don't think you're racist off, but I do want you to be mindful of what you're saying and how it can be applied to different situations. I think you mean well, but your point of view is partially racist. Although your wife is pointing out the wrong reason, your statement is racist because, while I get anyone of any race might need to change their typical way of acting for something like a dinner party or a work meeting, black people and other minorities are often not really acting differently when they're discriminated against by the police, or just by other people. To suggest so has a spicy hint of victim blaming, suggesting it isn't racism itself, but it's what the victims of racism are doing at the time. And that's just strictly not the case. In the context of systemic racism, your argument sides with upholding the status quo, which is by default in favor of a racist point of view. Rather than addressing the problem, you prescribe that the victims shouldn't bring it upon themselves and accept their status as second-class citizens instead of ever being treated equally. You know, Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Your argument is one facet of victim blaming. Now extend this thinking to other areas. If only rape victims didn't look the way they do in public. Or, if only abused children would simply behave. Whose side are you on? What you said was racist, but I hope you said it out of ignorance. Not because you think black people and minorities are bad and they behave badly. Minorities are targeted more based on implicit bias and get treated more harshly due to implicit bias. It's not about behaving better. This has been my understanding when I have read about race issues minorities have with police. I also bet your black friend was raised to act better and be more behaved than white people because of systematic racism and implicit bias. It's like when an abuse victim has to stay calm and not let themselves react, or they will look like the bad guy and the aggressor in order to be believed and taken seriously. Not be seen just as bad as their abuser, or be seen as the abuser when their abuser is staying calm. Black guy here. It's annoying how often I have to do everything in my power to avoid being the angry black guy who gets the police called on him, but my white friends can go ballistic and no one bats an eye. It is reality though, so I'm not going to do something to get 6 warning shots in the back because I should be equally able to yell. Edit. I don't think you're racist for being a realist and your wife is an idealist. I do not have a right to discuss those matters because I will never understand what it's like for them. This is wrong on many levels. First, because we can discuss matters that we do not comprehend fully. That's one way in which we learn, especially if we do it with someone that does understand them well. One just needs to be humble and have an open mind. Second, it's wrong to say that we will never understand because we haven't gone through it. Humans are able to imagine what others feel. We are highly social creatures. Notice I said, able. Just like we aren't rational creatures but creatures capable of reason. We are able to be empathetic, but aren't so all the time. Shutting people up by saying, you can't talk about it because you aren't black, will just make closet racists more firm in their beliefs.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Eracast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.